Hello and welcome back to Archetype Builds. This is going to be a review of Playtest 7. Let's talk about the fighter. The fighter in the Playtest 7 has a bunch of new features, which is odd to me because I feel like the fighter was in a pretty good spot, especially with the addition of Weapon Mastery and like their affinity for Weapon Mastery. But they get a bunch of other stuff. So let's get into it. Your fighting style, you can now swap out the fighting style that you choose whenever you gain a fighter level. This allows you to be more versatile over the course of a campaign. This is also the sort of thing, because your weapon masteries can also be switched out, it's the kind of thing that you might decide to go from a two-weapon fighter to a two-handed fighter to a versatile sword and board, and as you are accruing levels, you're able to make these changes and kind of completely pivot the class. So I love that. Also, if your DM is the kind of DM that like rolls on a loot table for your magic items and you get something that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to use, you can kind of re-customize to fit the circumstances. Second Wind is now going to restore one use on a short rest, so you're kind of getting an extra use of that at each short rest. The weapon mastery is now up to 6 weapon masteries, which is a crazy number. That's so much higher than anyone else in the game. I don't know why you are even needing that many weapon masteries. It's bananas. They lifted some restrictions on Action Surge, so Action Surge is going to go back to being much more like the original version. You just can't use the magic action with it, which is pretty much what we already interpreted from that last change. Lastly, they're getting a couple new features. So Tactical Mind is like a Primal Knowledge style thing. You can use a Second Wind, which remember you're getting back on a short rest, to add a d10 to an ability check. This, obviously, long run average of a d10 is a 5. Adding a +5 to an ability check is very, very good. Because of bounded accuracy, it is highly likely that if you failed, this will turn it into a success. So, very good chance of making ability checks with this ability. It does consume a resource. Second Wind has value, but I think for sessions that are more out of combat focused, it's going to be incredibly helpful. And remember, so many of the roles in the party, investigating, infiltrating, negotiating, all are heavily skill check based, right? So being able to pass those roles more consistently, 2 thumbs up. We're also getting Tactical Shift. Essentially, whenever you use your Second Wind with a bonus action, I think this is intended to be like, you can't use this with Tactical Mind or some other use of Second Wind, but mostly you'll be using it with a bonus action. Whenever you use your Second Wind, past level 5, you can move up to half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. You can kind of maneuver your way around the battlefield when you Second Wind. Cool. We're also getting Master of Armaments. Essentially, this is going to allow you to en masse rearrange the weapon masteries that you've got. So you've got your weapons that you've chosen a weapon mastery for. That weapon mastery is pre-assigned in the items table, and you can swap it for another weapon mastery that it meets the prerequisites of. So it's just like that feature we saw last time, but instead of for like one weapon, you're doing this for all 6 weapons that you are getting mastery for. So mass rearrangement of weapons. This essentially means you are customizing your arsenal to your needs. Finally, we have a 13th level feature, Studied Attacks, that is going to allow you, if you miss with an attack roll, to get advantage on the next attack roll against the same target. I like this, especially like imagine you're using a Vex weapon, so if you hit, you get advantage on the next attack, and if you miss now, you're going to get advantage on the next attack. So just a consistent source of advantage for fighters, but obviously you have to miss for this to trigger. So it's a little bit of like loss prevention advantage. So the Battlemaster is in here with plenty of changes. Most of the changes are little details in the fighting, in the Battlemaster maneuvers, but I want to note some overall class changes first. You're getting an extra proficiency, and then Know Your Enemy is going to give you the damage resistances, immunities, and vulnerabilities, which is, of course, the vital information that you wanted from Know Your Enemy. It's also, you're going to be able to consume Know Your Enemy as a bonus action instead of spending a minute like watching them. So that makes this incredibly more helpful. I don't know that the Battlemaster needed this feature to be more helpful. It's already an incredible subclass, so having a dead feature was not by any means a death knell of the class, but now I would say this is an incredibly useful feature, because right at the beginning of combat, you're going to be able to know, you're going to use your bonus action, and you're going to determine, what are we dealing with regards to this boss monster, and tailoring your damage to suit that creature. So very, very powerful. I think don't underrate how useful Know Your Enemy is now. At 15th level, Relentless is going to allow you to use a free maneuver once per turn, which is a lot. Like, that's a lot. That's so many. Every single turn you're getting a free maneuver, but you must use a D8, and by this point your dice has a D10 already. I don't think that's too bad of a fallback, and that means you're maneuvering all of the time now. So the big thing with maneuvers is all the Tasha's maneuvers are now kind of canonically in this subclass. There's lots and lots of maneuvers now. Tasha's had a long list, and there was already a long list before that, so this is a doubly long list. Lots and lots of maneuvers for Battle Masters to choose from. There are some minor benefits to things like evasive footwork and lunging attack. Parry as well allows you to choose between strength and dexterity because fighters are versatile. Precision attack got a minor boost. And then one thing that I actually really appreciate is Rally is going to let you choose Intelligence, Charisma, or Wisdom as the stat when you use it. We like to think of like battlefield commanders as being super charismatic, but this does allow you to live out the battlefield tactician with the intelligence boost, or the devout battle master with your wisdom. So I think this does allow for a greater degree of class fantasy in your Battle Master fighter. Also, a bunch of these Battle Master maneuvers were retrofitted to make them work with all kinds of attacks. So they're going to work on unarmed strikes and ranged attacks and all that kind of stuff. The new subclass for the fighter is the Brawler. Now, I love the ideas behind this class. I've dug a little bit deeper into it, and I don't think this is going to make it as it is, or at least I hope it doesn't. But I appreciate the attempt from Wizards. So, what's the Brawler? The Brawler is our improvised weapon or unarmed strike master fighter. We read that at third level, we are an unarmed expert, so we're going to roll a d6 plus strength for our unarmed strike. This is the same as the monk would be at this level. And if we aren't holding any weapons or a shield when we make the attack, that d6 becomes a d8. So if we want to be all in on unarmed fighting, right at third level, we've got a bigger damage dice than the monk does, but that's not going to scale as well as the monks will. We're also at level 3 an improvised expert. So this means that we are going to be proficient with improvised weapons. Great. The other thing we're going to get to do with this is we're going to get to customize how we use improvised weapons. So you've got your one-handed improvised weapon. This is your beer bottle or your maybe a light chair. Someone's bag that you're grabbed and you're going to smack people with. Or you have your two-handed, right? Like your benches or your tables, your large chairs. And you're going to get to choose one property that applies to one-handed weapons and one property that applies to two-handed weapons. How many choices do you have? 2 for each. So the one-handed is either going to have a thrown range, so you throw your beer bottle, or it's going to be light. And a light weapon, obviously, the advantage of that is you can wield 2 light weapons and make an extra attack with your bonus action. So that's essentially what it's steering you towards. Two-handed is also going to allow you to choose the thrown property, which is very, very funny. Your range is much shorter, or you can choose the reach property. So essentially, if you've got that bench, you can attack at 10 feet away. And then you're also going to get to choose a weapon mastery for each. So for one-handed, you can choose from Sap, which gives them disadvantage on their next attack roll, Slow, which slows them down, or Vex, which gives you an advantage on your next attack roll. For the two-handed, you get Cleave, which does that extra attack against a target nearby. You get Push, pushes them away, or Topple, which knocks them down. You choose one of these 3 properties for the one-handed, one of these 3 for the two-handed, and then anything you pick up that is one-handed or two-handed are going to have that property. 7th level, we're a grappling expert, which means we can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action, but it must be grapple or shove. Maybe I'm confused about the rules, because I thought if you were unarmed, you could always make a bonus action unarmed strike. Maybe I'm mistaken on that count, but this also introduces a limitation to your bonus action unarmed strike. However, at the start of each of your turns, if you're grappling a creature, you deal 1d6 bludgeoning damage to them, so That's something. And then at level 10, you actually get an advantage on targets that you are grappling. So if you grapple someone with one hand and then have a one-handed weapon, you have advantage on your attacks to hit them. At level 15, we're getting Improvised Specialist, which means that we can add our proficiency bonus to damage from improvised weapons, and that the damage die of our two-handed weapons becomes a d12. Weird that there's no bonus for the one-handed weapons, I guess because that proficiency bonus is going to be used more often if we're fighting with light weapons in two hands, so we're making that extra attack. I guess that's the reasoning. It also says when you attack with improvised weapons, you can use 2 of the mastery properties from Improvised Expert instead of 1. It is not clear to me whether that means you can choose between 2 of them when you strike, the way that the fighter used to be able to do in the last playtest, or if it means both of them apply. Like, are you pushing and toppling, or are you being able to choose between push and topple even though you had to select one? Not clear to me. The way that I read it is they both happen. And then finally, 18th level, Unarmed Specialist. We're back to unarmed fighting, and we're taking our unarmed strikes to a d8, and if we're not holding anything, a d10. Of course, by this point, the monk is doing a d12, so that's, yeah, you're no longer good at that. Overall, I'm frustrated in the way that this kind of splits the fighter into improvised weapons or unarmed strikes. The unarmed strikes path seems particularly weak. I don't think you would use it, so that makes this 18th level feature a dud. And, you know, your 3rd level, right, like unarmed strikes is probably not coming up that much. I don't love the grappling aspect, just kind of popped on there. Obviously, grappling can be a useful mechanic in the game, but again, it just feels like you are adding another like forking split onto your abilities, where you're the grappler, but also you're the improvised weapons, but also you're the unarmed strikes, and like you get lost in the hay. What this class would be really good for is a scenario where you either don't have access to weapons, get your weapons taken away often, need to, you know, like your weapons are stripped from you for a diplomatic meeting and then a fight breaks out, right? This person's never caught by surprise. You can liken this almost to a Soul Knife Rogue, right? Where the Soul Knife Rogue kind of like conjures their weapon into their hand. This person, you're kind of creating your weapon with flavor, right? You're saying like, I'm going to grab the inkwell on the table, and now that's a one-handed weapon or something. So you're always armed, but your armaments aren't great, essentially. And again, if you can fight with weapons, if you have access to weapons, fighters automatically get proficiency, fighters automatically get a ton of weapon masteries, and you can just get a subclass. You can just have a subclass. So I really feel like what you're trading here is all of these features combined make it so that you are like never disarmed, essentially. And so if you are armed, you're just missing a subclass, which is a bummer. And I kind of feel like most D&D campaigns, if you're in a fight, you're armed. Is that crazy to say? So I think this is a miss. I think it needs to go in fewer directions. I don't know what it would do differently other than maybe this needs to be the grappling person, because grappling is useful for a variety of reasons. Like maybe more bonuses to grappling and then cut a lot of the other fluff out. Champion's mostly unchanged. You're gonna your remarkable athlete is back in, and it affects initiative rolls explicitly. And your heroic warrior is going to give you inspiration every turn if you don't have it, which is super cool. So the champion is going to consistently have a source of inspiration. That inspiration gives you advantage, and then obviously your crit range is expanded. So definitely maintains its status as like the crit fishing build of the world. The fighter subclass that I'm most excited about is the Eldritch Knight. Has a lot of changes made to it, like a lot of changes. So first of all, they've taken away some of the spell school restrictions, and we are using the wizard spell list because we're back to class spell lists. So that is nice, and it's a buff. War magic, thank God, is buffed. So it is now basically the Bladesinger's like replace an attack with a cantrip thing that they do. That is so much better than the original Eldritch Knight feature. I really appreciate them doing this. It is minor, like given that it's like a level 7 feature, I don't think it's huge. Remember, the Bladesinger is literally a full spellcaster, right? And they get extra attack, and they can replace one of the attacks with a cantrip. So you take 1/3 casting, extra attack, replace a thing with a cantrip. You know, you don't want to play an Eldritch Knight. Like, you still don't want to. You want to play a Bladesinger, because the Bladesinger has the AC, has the same damage output, but has full spellcasting instead of 1/3 spellcasting. So it's a step in the right direction. It's not all the way there. And then improved War Magic, very high level, 18th level feature, but it instead allows you to replace an attack with a use of a first or second level spell. Now, I want to love this because it increases basically your output per turn, right? When you consider, like, am I going to cast a second level spell, or am I going to attack at that level 3 times? Now it's, I can attack twice and cast the second level spell, which is great. Not only that, it allows you to replace 2 of your attacks. So if you want to, you can cast 2 second level spells in the same action and make a weapon attack. That's a lot of output. Like, that's a very high burn rate. Speaking of burn, you don't have that many spell slots. I mean, at 18th level, you've got the 4 first level spell slots and the 3 second level spell slots. So how many turns can you have this kind of output? 2 or 3? And then you've, like, wiped out your spell slots. So honestly, like, cantrip scale with your level, not with your spellcasting ability or anything, like with your level. So at 18th level, your cantrips are competing with or better than most first level spells. So I kind of feel like you just do the cantrip thing. Like, that's like improved War Magic at 18th level is good for 1 turn Nova, and then you just go back to the War Magic thing that you've been doing this whole campaign. Which is a little bit of a bummer. If it came online earlier, it would be substantially better. But I think this is maybe a miss on our 18th level feature here. Still, the Eldritch Knight is significantly upgraded, and we love to see that.